welcome to another edition of Market Outlook for June 27th to July 1st, 2022. Monday, the German retail sales month over month had a previous reading of minus 5.4% and a consensus figure of minus 0.2%, a higher than consensus reading will be good for the euro. The US durable goods order month over month and the durable goods month over month were previously at 0.4% and 0.5% respectively, while the consensus figure were at 0.6% and minus 0.4% respectively. Higher than expected figure would be good for the greenback. Also, the US spending home sales month over month had a previous reading of minus 3.9%, while the consensus figure is at 2.0%. A higher than expected figure will be good for the greenback. Tuesday, the GfK German consumer climate had a previous reading of minus 26.0, while the consensus figure is at minus 26.0. A higher than expected figure would be good for the euro. The US good trade balance was previously at minus 106.70 billion. A higher than expected figure will be good for the greenback. The US CB consumer confidence had a previous reading of 106.4 with a consensus of 100.0. Higher than expected figure would be good for dollar. Wednesday, the Japanese retail sales year over year had a previous figure of 3.1%. Higher than expected figure would be good for the yen. The Australian retail sales month over month had a previous figure of 0.9%. A higher than expected figure would be good for the Aussie. The US GDP quarter over quarter for the first quarter had a figure of minus 1.5%, while the consensus figure is projected to be 7.1%. A higher than consensus figure will be good for the greenback. Also, the US GDP price index quarter over quarter for the first quarter had a previous reading of 8.1%, while the consensus is at 7.2%. A greater than expected reading will be good for the greenback. Thursday, the Japanese industrial production month over month had a previous figure of minus 1.5%. A higher than expected figure will be good for the yen. The New Zealand's ANZ business confidence had a previous figure of minus 55.6. A higher than expected reading will be good for the kiwi. The Australian private sector credit month over month had a previous reading of 0.8%. A higher than expected figure will be good for the Aussie. The Chinese composite manufacturing and non-manufacturing PMI had a previous reading of 48.4, 49.6 and 47.8. The manufacturing PMI had a consensus reading of 48.6. Higher than expected figure will be good for the yuan. The UK business investment quarter over quarter for the first quarter had a previous figure of minus 0.5%. A higher than expected figure would be good for the pound. The UK current account had a previous figure of minus 7.3 billion and a consensus figure of minus 17.6 billion. Higher than expected figure would be good for the pound. The UK GDP year over year for the first quarter and quarter over quarter for the first quarter were previously at 8.7% and 6.5% respectively, while the consensus figures were at 6.5% and 1.0% respectively. A higher than expected figure will be good for the pound. The UK nationwide house price index year over year and month over month had a previous reading of 11.2% and 0.9% respectively. A higher than expected reading will be good for the pound. The Switzerland retail sales year over year had a previous figure of minus 0.6%. A higher than expected reading will be good for the Swiss franc. Also, the Switzerland KOF leading indicators had previous figure of 96.8 with a consensus of 102.3. Higher than consensus figure will be good for the Swiss franc. The French consumer spending had a previous reading of minus 0.4%, while it had a consensus of 0.6%. A higher than expected figure will be good for the euro. The European Union unemployment rate was previously at 6.8%. A forecasted figure is also 6.8%. A higher than expected figure will be good for the euro. The German CPI had a previous figure of 0.9%. A higher than expected figure will be good for the euro. Friday, the Tokyo Core CPI year over year and the Tokyo CPI excluding food and energy month over month had a previous reading of 1.9% and 0.1% respectively. The consensus was 2.0% for the core CPI. Higher than expected figure would be good for the yen. The French, German, and European Union PMI had a previous reading of 51.0, 52.0, and 52.0 respectively, while the consensus figure were 54.5, 52.0, and 52.0 respectively. Higher than expected reading would be good for the euro. The US manufacturing PMI had a previous figure of 52.4. Higher than expected figure will be good for the greenback. The EU CPI year-over-year had a previous figure of 8.1%, while its consensus figure was 8.3%. Higher than expected figure will be good for the euro. The US ISM manufacturing employment and ISM manufacturing PMI had previous figures of 49.6 and 56.1 respectively, while the manufacturing PMI had a consensus of 55.8. Higher than expected would be good for the dollar. Special announcement. TradeLend FX will be hosting the African Financial Markets Conference on the 2nd of July 2022 at the NAF Conference Center and Suite Abuja. The maiden edition will be housing over 1,000 guests and 20 financial veterans from all over the world. Visit www.ninjabits.com/AFMC to register for free. This is your market outlook for the week. My name is Helen Samuel. Have a great trading week.